Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, and this episode is all about how to feel better on a bad day. So, you know, the ones where maybe you start the day, maybe it happens some way through the day, maybe it's just by the end of the day that for whatever reason you're feeling terrible. Maybe you're feeling anxious. Maybe you're disappointed. Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're stressed. Maybe you're embarrassed. Whatever it is that you're feeling, it's leading to you having a terrible day. So, if you've come to this particular podcast because you're having a terrible day or you had a terrible day, I'm sorry to hear it. I hope that you just take this 30 minutes to chill with me in your ears or just go out for a nice walk. But if you haven't had a bad day today, but you're pretty sure that you've had one in the past and you know there's probably one coming in the future, then s- remember the tips that you get in this episode today and squirrel them away for another day. Because the reality is that bad days happen. I guess we all wish we could avoid them at work, but I've never been in a job where you can. I have never been in a position where you didn't have a bad day for one reason or another. And what I've learned over the time that I've been coaching is that everybody else seems to have pretty bad days too. But we get to decide how we want to deal with ourselves when we do have a bad day. So, for most of us, we would say, well, we just want to feel better. Right? And that's the title of this podcast episode, How to Feel Better on a Bad Day. We want to feel better because having a bad day, the feelings that we're feeling, it sucks. It's horrible. So I'm going to walk you through some steps today that I use to feel better on a bad day. And it might not be what you're imagining. It might not be what you're doing right now. Because in the past, I certainly had a technique that I thought was like the best way of feeling better on a bad day. And that was basically kind of completely ignoring how I was feeling, shoving it down, pretending that everything was fine, thinking positive, like slapping a happy face on it, and then having a glass of wine at the end of the day or a bag of sweets, whatever. I thought that was the way to feel better on a bad day. Turns out, yeah, I was pretty much entirely wrong. And now I often coach clients on a bad day. So they will happen to have a coaching session on like a Wednesday morning, and for whatever reason, they will just be having a terrible day. And that is the opportunity to really think with somebody about how do you normally handle yourself on a bad day? Like, how do you approach it? And then, how would you like to approach it in the future? And I'm a confidence coach, right? I think it's really important to know how to handle yourself on a bad day because bad days are coming. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try to get everything perfect, you are going to have a bad day. And I think if you know how to handle yourself on a bad day, you not only have more confidence to try things that might not turn out the way you want, so you may have more bad days, right? If you're really putting yourself out there. But also, if you can handle yourself in a good way and feel better, you have more resilience. It doesn't hang the bad day doesn't hang around for as long because you're able to deal with it and you're able to move on. So I think being able to handle yourself on a bad day is vital for confidence building. It's one of the tools that I go through with my clients. So I want to share with you today that kind of process that I take them through to help them think about it. And today, you are going to decide how you are going to deal with yourself on bad days, how you need to handle yourself on a bad day in order to feel better. And at the moment, you might be like, "Yeah, I know how to feel better, Anna. I just like ignore it all day and pretend I'm fine. And if anyone says to me, 'How are you?' I'm like, 'Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?' And then I just have a bottle of wine at the end of the night, and then I just wake up, and the next day I'm fine." Right? That is a technique you can use if you want, but I'm going to invite you to think about something different today. So, probably for most of you, you've never really considered the best way to feel better on a bad day. That is what we're going to do today. And I'm going to get you to decide how to approach it in the future. So, that the next time you have a bad day, I'm sorry, you're going to have a bad day in the future, you've actually got some tricks up your sleeve. You've actually got an approach that you're going to use, that you're going to try in order to feel better on a bad day. So, the first thing I want you to think about is if a friend came to you or a colleague and you were like, "Oh, how you doing?" They're like, "Do you know what? I'm just having a really bad day. I feel awful." How would you handle that? How would you treat them? What approach would you take? And when I ask most people this, they say to me stuff like variation on a theme, but stuff like, "Oh, I would ask them how they were feeling, and I would like some version of I would acknowledge it." So I would say, "Oh, that sounds, oh right, yeah. That sounds that sounds tough. That sounds difficult." And they say, I might, give them a bit of space to talk about it if it seems like they wanted to talk. I might speak quite calmly to them. I might like speak in a little soothing voice. I might kind of tilt my head on one side. I might have like a concerned expression on my face. I might say to them, "Is there anything that I can do to help you? Can I take anything off your plate, or is there any like bit of work that you need some support with today because you're having a bad day?" They also will say things like, "Oh, I might like say to them, 'Oh, do you want to go for a walk, or can I make you a cup of tea?' Or maybe I'll just like bring them a little treat." All really nice things. All things you probably do instinctively if somebody tells you that they're having a terrible day, right? That's the kind of approach you take with someone. You give them space, you give them time, you listen to them, you see if there's anything you can take off their plate, you acknowledge how they're feeling, you're really gentle with them, versus how you deal with yourself when you're having a really bad day. So when I ask most people how they deal with themselves, and hands up, this was me completely in the past. So in the past, when I was having a really bad day, I would do exactly the same thing my clients tell me that they do, which is some variation on try to ignore how I'm feeling. So I sort of push it to one side, or I shove it down, or I kind of put a happy face on it. Most people tell me that they try and kind of fake it, that they pretend, that they're fine and that they don't mind and that it's all cool. They tell themselves, "Oh, do you know, just toughen up or just power through or think positive." That's one that I hear a lot. "Oh, try and think positive." And then they also tell me that they beat themselves up and they get frustrated and impatient with themselves because they're like, "Well, I'm having this shit day, I shouldn't be feeling like this. Blah blah. I should just be able to get over it, whatever it is, right? Whatever this thing is that's happened." So do you notice the difference? You notice the difference between those two approaches. When someone else is having a really bad day, we instinctively are gentle and supportive, and we give them time and space and patience and kindness. When we're having a bad day, we're like the opposite. Imagine if you were having a really bad day and you told, a close friend or your partner or whatever, Oh, I just feel really shit today. I'm having a really bad day. And they were like, you should try and ignore it. Shove it down. You should think positive. You know, you have a really great job. Loads of people would be pleased to be in your position. You should just keep a straight face, fake it. And you know what, as well? You should be over it by now. Like, seriously? You're still whinging about this? Right? If that was somebody's approach, how would you feel? I know I would feel invalidated, for one, and probably pretty pissed off. But that's the approach that most of us are taking with ourselves. If it would piss us off that somebody else would do it, I can promise you that it pisses you off if you do it to yourself. So, if this isn't the best technique, if this isn't the best way of dealing with ourselves, what are? And I'm going to suggest that however you would treat somebody else when they were having a really bad day, that is exactly how you want to be treated. So, you know the old adage, treat others the way you would like to be treated. I say, treat yourself the way you would like other people to treat you. So, if you're having a bad day and all you need is somebody to just give you a bit of a listening ear, be a bit understanding, be a bit kind, be gentle with you, see if there's anything that you need, that is what you need to give to yourself on a bad day. That is the thing that will make you feel better. That is the approach that will make you feel better. Not being a, if you'll pardon the word, total bitch to yourself. Not being impatient, frustrated, telling yourself, invalidating your own feelings by thinking positive and shoving it down. That's not the way. Because when we do that, the feelings don't actually go away. They just go somewhere in your body and they just come out at a later date. How many times has it happened where you're still ruminating about something that upset you or frustrated you at work 3 days later? Most of the time, what I find is that if people are doing that, it's because that feeling has not like had its chance to be felt, and it hasn't moved. It's just still staying in the body. So if you find yourself ruminating on things days after or things staying with you, it might be an indication, might be that you could be not kind of acknowledging the feelings when they're actually coming up. So they're just hanging around, just staying there for a long time. And before we get onto the specific tips, I think there's just a couple of social kind of bits that we need to be aware of. So, really often in a coaching session, a client will say, well, this is how I'm dealing with this situation. And I'll say, could there be any impact here from like a wider social context? So, is this all just about you, or is there a wider social context here? Are there other factors at play? Is that something you've learned or something that you've been taught, etc.? And I think in this instance, what most of us get taught is from being a kid. When you express an emotion or when you're really upset, I mean, and I'm talking specifically about the culture that I've been raised in, right? So I can't speak to everybody's culture. You think about the culture that you've been raised in, but the culture that I was raised in was very much, oh, don't cry, don't be upset, look on the bright side, and you could be worse off. That is how I was kind of programmed, if you like. That is how I was taught to handle a moment of upset. That's how I was handled in a moment of upset. And it is not how I want to handle myself. But the point here is that there will be cultural influences, there will be family influences. Like, how were you shown how to look after yourself when you were having a bad day? Were you just told that you should just buck up and carry on and you should be lucky and you should be grateful? And is that having an impact now on how you handle yourself in those moments? It might be. The other element to this, which is part of the social context, is women at work. Now, I actually coached someone about this just this morning. And this client, she's senior, very successful. And she was observing the fact that she said, I've been in so many meetings where if a woman makes a point and she is passionate about it, and you can tell, she said you can see people shutting down and switching off. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think you might know what I'm talking about here. Oh, she's very emotional. Oh, she's hysterical. We've all heard that before. Oh, she's crazy. I wonder how many times over the years that kind of it's like a belittling, right, has been used to put women down and keep them quiet. And in our workplaces, it's like nobody is allowed to have any emotions unless we're completely flat about it and completely cool about it. Like she's saying the men in her department are, then you shouldn't say anything because it will count as a black mark against you. How many of you have experienced that? Right? Probably loads of you. And I wonder whether that has also played into the way that we handle ourselves on days where we're feeling really bad. That might be part of the reason that we keep it inside, that we don't express that emotion, that we do put a professional face on it, and we do try to ignore it and try to think positive and then get annoyed with ourselves and impatient with ourselves for feeling something. And there may be lots of moments at work where you are having a bad day and you really do need to keep that professional. Well, I'm going to call it a facade because it is a facade, right? You're feeling a certain way, you're having a terrible day, but you're kind of able to pretend that you're not in order to do the job and do what you need to do. That might be appropriate in your setting. But what I'm talking about is how you handle yourself internally on those days. And you don't have to do that in front of everyone if you don't want. You can just do these things in the privacy of your own head or your own heart or your own home. So we're going to move on now to think about how I like to handle myself on a bad day. And I hope that some of these tips are useful for you too. So, first thing is that now I acknowledge how I'm actually feeling. And I force myself to kind of label what the emotion is, to kind of figure out what the emotion is and to say it, and usually say it out loud. So, I'll give you an example of something that happened this week. I was hoping to do a piece of work with a particular business, and they emailed this week and said, some stuff shifted, things have changed, and we're not going to be pursuing this piece of work. We're not going to be going ahead with it. So I was like, right, okay. And I was like a bit quiet that day. My partner was like, oh, are you all right? I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And then I thought, do you know what? I'm actually feeling quite disappointed. So, in this process that I'm going to share with you now, the first step is to actually notice what's going on in your body. So, I tried to notice, like, am I actually okay? And I was like, well, I'm okay, but but I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. And in acknowledging that, it it eased a little bit. So, to acknowledge how you're feeling is really important. So, if you struggle with this, it can be hard at the beginning. Just notice what's happening in your body. Like, what are you feeling? And then, can you put a label on it? Can you put an emotion word onto it? Mine was disappointed. And then I say to myself, like out loud, I'm feeling disappointed. And what that allows me to do is acknowledge how I'm actually feeling, right? Acknowledge that I'm feeling disappointed, that I'm feeling something bad, that I'm feeling something that just feels like it sucks in the moment. Instead of ignoring it, I'm acknowledging it and I'm saying it, right? I'm saying it, I'm labeling it. The second thing is that I validate it. So, with that disappointed example, I can say, I'm feeling disappointed because, and that because is part of my validation. So I'm like, I'm feeling disappointed. That's acknowledging. And I can say, because I was really looking forward to doing that piece of work and I thought it was going to generate X amount of revenue in the business. Excuse me. And I can see that I can see why that would be disappointing because you'd done a good proposal and they were excited about it and you were excited about it, and that is disappointing because you were looking forward to doing it and all the rest of it. So there, I'm validating why I'm feeling how I'm feeling. I'm not telling myself I should be feeling better. I'm not skirting over it. I'm being like, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. Disappointed. Yeah, you would be. You worked really hard on that proposal. You were excited about that work that you thought you were going to do. So, first, you acknowledge it and label it. Second, you validate it. Third, you remember to be very, very gentle. In any moment of, heightened emotion, whether that's disappointment, stress, anxiety, whatever, you don't need someone like coming at you with the claws out or coming at you all guns blazing. You need someone to just be, you're a bit fragile. You're feeling a lot of feelings. You're feeling some uncomfortable emotion. You just need someone to be gentle. So I know I need to be very gentle with myself. And I am. And it's just a really sweet way to handle myself in that moment, right? And then the next step is to say to myself, well, what do I need right now? Or what do I need to do right now? And if I ask myself that question and just pause, there is always an answer. And in that moment, in that example where I was disappointed, the answer that came was just need to sit here for a few minutes and then I need to go and get a hug. Need to get a cuddle from my partner. Brilliant. So that is my process. Really simple, 4 steps. If you can't remember, just hold up your 4 fingers and be like, what do I need to do here? And even if you can't remember all the steps, like, doesn't really matter. Just take away like the energy of that. The kind of approach, right? You know how to do it. You do it with other people all the time. All you need to do is transfer to yourself what you would do to somebody else. And it takes a bit of time and it takes a bit of practice because it's not how we've been used to handling ourselves. We've been used to handling ourselves like, I don't know, some mean, invalidating, impatient, unkind. And now we're going to do something differently. So I'm just going to recap on those 4 steps. First, you're going to acknowledge how you're feeling. You're going to admit it. And then you're going to say, what is it? You're going to admit how you're feeling. And then you're going to say, what feeling is it? What emotion is it? What am I actually feeling? Then you're going to validate why you feel like that. Why is it legitimate that you would feel like that in this moment? Why is that feeling justified? Give that to yourself. Number 3 is to remember to be very, very gentle. No one needs someone being harsh to them in this moment, right? Too fragile for that. And number 4 is ask yourself some version of this question. What do you need right now, Anna? What can I do for you right now? And just wait. And I promise you, an answer to that question will arrive in your mind. I'm just going to really quickly share a story of a client that I was coaching last week. And this was the exact topic that we were coaching on, right? How to feel better on a bad day. And just like most of us, she said that generally she gets pretty annoyed, frustrated with herself on bad days, that she can't just snap out of it, get over it, think positive, classic. And when we were talking about how she would like to approach herself on a day where not only actually had she been having a bad day, it was like a really bad day where she was just feeling like completely frazzled, completely freaking out. And she brought in the analogy of how she would treat a dog if they were just really freaking out, really like snappy, barky, like they were scared, they were all over the place. And she said, I would treat that dog with real gentleness. I would give it a lot of time and space, and I would just be with it. I would let it come to me, and maybe I would give it a treat. And she also said, I would not judge that dog. I wouldn't think, oh, it's a bad dog because it's, having a moment where its emotions are really high. She said, I would understand that the dog is just, it's just the emotions are high. The dog's freaking out. That's all right. Doesn't make it a bad dog. And I know what I need to do in order to soothe it and calm it so it can come back. And I said, is that the approach you need to take with yourself? She was like, yeah, I think it is. So, like, buried within all of us is how we want to be treated on a bad day. And that is how you feel better on a bad day. You give yourself what it is you give to other people. You give yourself what you would want, what you would like dearly wish from someone else. You give that to yourself. That is how you feel better on a bad day. So, share your reflections with me. I'd love to hear it. Get in touch with me. You can get me on Instagram. You can get me on LinkedIn. The last thing I've got to tell you about is that this is one of the tools that we use to help women feel more confident at work as part of our Confident at Work program. So, this is a coaching and training program that I run 3 times a year. It's a small program. You get individual and group coaching and group trainings. And basically, you leave with a tool bag filled with all of the tools and the strategies and the knowledge of your own mind and how you work in order that you can, be your most confident and do your best work day to day. This is the stuff that nobody teaches you. Nobody taught you this stuff when you were a kid, but I teach it now. I think it's vitally important. We need more confident women in the workplace that are going to keep on smashing it and keep on moving up and kicking ass. So if you want to join us in Confident at Work, we start in September and the applications are open in June. So basically, you just have to have a chat with me and we'll see whether or not you're the right fit for the Confident at Work program. If you are, or you have people who who you want to refer, great, do that and get in touch. And lastly, I just want to share with you a quick quote from one of the current Confident at Work participants. She says, before joining the Confident at Work program, my mind was on constant overdrive as I told myself, you're not good enough to be here. What do you know about this topic? They can all tell you've got no idea what you're doing and you are stupid, small, and weak. This was debilitating to my confidence, my happiness, and my career. Not speaking up seemed safer than having a clear, confident voice. The Confident at Work program has worked on my confidence from the inside out. Together, we've probed why I feel certain ways, how to cope with my internal critic, and how to recognize the strengths that lie within. Asking a question and speaking my mind doesn't seem as scary as it once was, and I'm starting one day at a time to turn my automatic critical voice into one that's understanding, more logical, and kind. All women deserve the opportunity to feel confidence at work like they have never felt before. I cannot recommend Anna highly enough to set you on this path. So, if that sounds like something you could do with too, then do think about joining us in the Confident at Work program. We're booking now and we're starting in September, and we would love to have you. So, I will see you again in episode 5. Until then, Have a good week.